All right, here we are. The She Will Not Fall podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you, Faith, because I have seen your work online. It's dope. I'm like, I really need to talk to her and see
Thank
what's
you.
going on. And like, I just been wanting to have this conversation with you for a minute. And so I'm so happy to have you in this space for us to have that type of conversation.
Thank you. I love getting to chat with my sisters. Like it is my
Yes.
favorite thing. So I was so excited when you talked to me about coming on your podcast. I was like, ooh, I am ready. So yes.
So we play off of the popular social media trend around here, how it started versus how it's going. So I want to start with how it started. So kind of walk us through your story because I think it's important for other women to hear your story, and just kind of how you started and lead us up to the point of, what was a defining moment for you that made you kind of shift and be like, you know what, I need to kind of rethink this thing. So just kind of walk us through your story a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you all the detailed cliff notes of my story. And so I was born in Chicago. That's where all of my family is. So grandparents, aunts, uncles, for the most part, everybody is in Chicago. And I lived there until I was 6 years old. So I was, I still have very much so memories of living there, friends, life, and what it was like being there. But we moved. To Texas. So when we moved to Texas, we had nobody. So like no family, no like extra support system. Like there was literally like nobody that we had there besides our parents and my brother, and that's it. Like just the four of us. So I just think, hold on a second, wait, just saying like y'all. I just gotta tell you, I have a niece having a fit. So her mom's quieting her down. Okay. Anyway, I want to make sure y'all can really hear this story. Okay. But anyways, this is Black family, multi-generational family. We all living together. And my niece is strong-willed. And so she is definitely beyond the spirit and in her flesh and
Yeah.
letting us know what is going on with her. Anyway,
Yes.
so mom, dad, brother, all of us together. My brother and I are the best of friends. So it is of no surprise that now that I'm in a life transition, I'm living with him and his family. We are very, very close. And so us moving away from our family was definitely, I feel like, an added extra of making us very close. The other thing that made us very close is the fact that we were also homeschooled. So my brother did first and second grade in Chicago. We moved to Texas, and my mom, she went to college, and my dad did some education at ITT Tech and DeVry, but it was not heard of to be homeschooled. Okay, mind you, my parents are from Chicago. We're city people still. Like even though we moved to Texas, like we were still city people, and my mom and dad just felt like we should be homeschooled, and that was so outrageous to our family. Like they were just like, "What are you talking about?" Like I really just don't even know what your kids are going to turn out like. Are they going to be weird? All this kind of stuff. But my mom and dad stuck to their guns. They said, this is what we feel like we should do. My mom would always say, I'm raising leaders. You all aren't just like some kids to me. Like you are leaders. You have a purpose and a plan. And I feel like God wants you to be homeschooled so I can cultivate you and cultivate your leadership. And every single year she would say, we'll see if you're going to be homeschooled next year. I don't know. Well, we will see till I was done and graduated. So, but Black family, we'll see. I don't know. We'll see. And we'll see was I was done. And so, um, I grew up in a very much so healthy nuclear family. When we moved to Chicago, we were really involved in TD Jake's church, big church. So I've grown up in mega churches. So big church, black church. And so that was really very formative for me. When we came up, we were a part of kind of like a multicultural church before when we were in Chicago. My parents were kind of from like the Black Baptist background when they were like 18 and up. My mom didn't really grow up in church, but she did come to know Jesus as a child through a like Quaker ministry. I know that's like kind of wild, but she came
Wow.
to know God through like a Quaker ministry that would come in their like neighborhoods and stuff. And so she had like that understanding of faith, but like being 18 years old in the Black Baptist church, that was her first experience in like that kind of a church setting, and that way, which is very different. Um, if you are a part of Black Baptist Church, you understand the politics of that. And so I think some of that she kind of like wrestled with. Um, so then we went to a Black church, predominantly Black church. And then in Houston, we went to a large, um, multicultural church, but it's Joel Osteen's church. We went there, and so I know a lot of people are gonna be like, "Oh my God, boo!" But for us, it was about, for my parents, for us, it was about, did we have friends? Did we have people that we could connect with? And we visited several churches, and that was the one place we found friends. And part of that was just, there were other kids that were homeschooled there. There were other kids that we could kind of like have some type of relationship with, and it was multicultural. And so for my parents, it was like they wanted us to be in a multicultural setting and context, which meant everybody, which is what my brother and I are now used to. Everyone, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. That was very important to my parents. And so that's what we kind of found in being a part of that youth group. And while there's still some things that probably like fundamentally I don't fully, agree with at this point in my life, in the sense that, obviously like our mindsets are definitely important. Some things aren't just going to happen just because it just ain't going to happen like that. But when it comes to like the actual people that were there, the community we experienced, the Black leader who was my first youth group leader that I can remember, when I was like the only Black girl at camp, and it was only this Black woman who was there. She was my camp leader. I still talk to her to this day, and she's known me since I was 12 years old. Okay, so I'm 30 now. She's still very much so a part of my life, and she's still so very much so a part of several other students' lives, all these years later. So she's given 20 years of her life as a Black woman, as a volunteer, to pour into us, right? And so things like that mattered, and so there's friendships and long-lasting things that impacted me. But girl, I was still in the bubble. I was still in the Christian bubble. And so it really took going to a predominantly white institution for school, a Christian school, for me to be like, oh, wait a minute. Because I was like buying into it, right? Like, okay, this is just what we do. We love Jesus, like, and you don't even know truly what you're being fed is what we have more so named now, this like white nationalistic patriotic rhetoric, until you're in it. And I honestly, to be honest with you, I didn't really experience that till college. I really didn't fully experience that coming up in church, whether it was a Black church, multicultural churches I was at. It wasn't really like that there. But once you got to these other places,
Yes.
it was. And it was at the church we used to visit. That was a more charismatic church. So we weren't members there, but we would visit, and they had that very much so nationalistic things slightly like intertwined, and you wouldn't know it unless you just started being like, oh, hold up. So when my light switch moment for me, when everything changed, was when I was in my school, and my friend and I, we talk about this and we laugh about it, but it's literally the truth. Outside of the people who worked in the food services department, which were like contracted to work for our school, us students, young Black women on campus, there were only about 10 of us at the time when I got to the school in 2009. So 10 of us young Black women that I could count on my hand, because I would be looking every which way, like, where y'all at? And I was only there because my brother went there, because I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to be in ministry. But my parents are like, oh, that's cute, you going to college. And so I went, and it was just such a different experience. And when I tell you, everybody talking about like evangelicalism and all this stuff, I didn't even really know what evangelicalism was. So I was like in my mid-20s. I was like, what is evangelicalism? And then I looked back upon my experiences, and I was like, oh, well, I guess that's evangelicalism, But I didn't really know what that was. The denomination that I went to for school was Assemblies of God. I had never heard of Assemblies of God. I know what the Assemblies of God was. So like for me, like contextually, because I grew up mostly non-denominational, unless it was like a Black cultural church denomination context, like Baptist, that I understood, I didn't understand I didn't understand like white Baptist rules, because they were different from what I understood
Yeah.
Baptist rules to be in the black church context, right? So everything was confusing to me. I was confused by all of it in their ethos. It didn't make sense to me. And so I went on a mission trip to Rwanda, and these white folks, oh my God, like I was having this like aha moment as a 19-year-old. Like, wow, I'm in this country and everybody looks like me. And I'm like having this like connection with my people. This is like a holy moment for me. And on the other side of it, I have these white people who are racist. And I'm gonna call them racist because they were. Now, some of them were just like green and ignorant, but there was two particular people who were just racist. Um, and I was, I was so offended. I was like, the audacity. And this is really terrible of me probably to say, but I was like, y'all white folks, you have a different socioeconomic status than me, as in you are of a lower socioeconomic status than me. And then you have the audacity to
Yeah.
like say racist jokes in front of me, to act like I should, be okay with your behavior. I was just like, I don't even understand the life you live. And so, so I was so offended. I was so upset. And so they were so racist to me the whole trip. They would say, "Oh, they're just serving you because you're black. They're coming to you first because you're black. They're doing this because you're black." But then you had one girl on the trip and she had jungle fever. She would always make jokes about how she can't wait to try to get a black man to have some black babies. And girl, I was like, wait a minute, where am I? Where am I? When it was time to like serve and like paint, everybody was sick. Only a few people were like, "Oh, I'm sick. I'm sick." A few people were legitimately sick, but a bunch of them were just didn't want to do the work. And but then I saw how they just wanted to take pictures of black kids and then post it and say of what they're doing. And I was like, they don't even care about black kids in America. They don't care about black kids in America. And they don't even care about me as a black woman because they're treating me crazy on this trip.
Yeah.
And one of them were like, "Oh, so do you do hair? Can you cornrow my hair? Can you do this and can you do that?" I said, "No, I don't cornrow. I don't." I said, "And not all of us do. And so I can't, and I'm not doing it for your hair. So please leave me alone and stop making assumptions about us black people as a whole because we're just not all the same." And after leaving that trip, I was like, I'm going to be honest. I couldn't even look at white people the same because coming up, I was so used to being socialized with white folks and being fine with them. I didn't have any problems with them. They would say, you're a black white girl. Like that stuff didn't bother me at the time because I was like, okay, like I'm fitting in. I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to be accepted. And so it didn't bother me at the time until I kind of began to like explore and understand my identity and who I am. And I realized like, oh, wait a minute, like, hold on, those are not compliments. By the time I got back from that trip and people were saying things like that to me, I was correcting them. By the time I got back in the classroom, and they were making jokes, I was like, "Oh no, 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 no! I'm I'm not an acceptable black person for you because I talk properly. I talk the way I talk because my mom wanted me to talk this way. She wanted us to talk properly. She didn't want me to talk in slang. That's just not what was allowed in my household. So obviously, that's who I was socialized to be and become." And her grandmother was the same, and that's just the way that it's happened for me. But I'm no different, no better, and I'm not trying to be white. I'm just trying to be myself. And so if you're
Exactly.
attaching my intelligence to the way that I talk, like, huh? Anyway, girl, that's where it started. That's where it started. I had
Yeah.
a healthy home, healthy black, strong home, crazy white folks.
Oh my gosh. I identify with pieces of that because my dynamic was a little bit different. Like I grew up in black church. Like I was in black schools. And so I think like my first experience was when I decided to leave my family church that
Mm.
we were all a part of. And I was like, I'm sick of this. I can't do this anymore. And I went to at the time, it was a predominantly white space. I think they've gotten a little bit better, but it's still predominantly white. And it's a very popular mega church here in Atlanta. I'm not going to call names. I'll try to be respectful. Um, and I got there and I was like, oh, this is cool. This is great. Oh my gosh. Like, okay, the worship's different because I need some gospel music, but that's okay. I think I can get adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
But then Trayvon Martin happened and it was like crickets, nothing. And I identify with your story in the sense of you have that moment with, especially white evangelicals, because you've been in that space where you feel now very uncomfortable. Like you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel safe, right? So it's like y'all haven't said anything. Like this child was murdered,
Nothing.
nothing. And it's like then Mike Brown happens, nothing. But then around that time, Sandy Hook happened. They did a so in white church spaces they'll do something called an opener to
Mm-hmm.
service, right? So they had this whole big opener paying homage to these little kids, which I didn't have an issue with because I'm like, these were babies, right?
Yeah.
They keep that same energy when it comes to black and brown bodies. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where that shifted me. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe here because you don't see me.
Oh,
Or you
girl.
see me as a thing to put on your website, because that did happen. You see me as a person to put on your website to show you have diversity. And like, we're a church for all people. But it's like when it is time for you to actually put some legs to this thing, silence. So I identify.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And you
identify.
know what? I'm pretty sure that I know what church you're talking about because I just moved to Baltimore from Atlanta, and I visited several churches over the time that I was there and became a member of none. Um, and and just that's a whole other story. But needless to say, I've popped in and out of churches throughout my 20s. So this whole deconstruction movement for people where they're having this awakening, a lot of that happened for me at like 21. So, but anyway, I remember going to a particular well-known church in Atlanta, and because I have a different experience, I will not name this name of this church. Um, and it was Christmas time. And my mom wanted to go, and I had visited a few times, and it wasn't bad or anything. But my mom was staying with me at the time when we went to visit. They were doing this point in the service where you like hold up the candles and like you like sing a song or whatever, like a Christmas song. When I tell you, I was holding a candle, I looked around the room. It was mostly all white people. Now, granted, I've gone to other services and there were some people of color. You see mostly all white people at this particular service, and just my mom and I. And I looked around and I said, I feel like I'm gonna get out movie. I feel very uncomfortable that I'm around all these white people with live lit candles and me. And I will never forget that moment. I was like, this is why I don't feel safe. This is why I don't feel safe in these spaces anymore. This is why I do not go to predominantly white churches anymore. And I'm very hesitant of coded multicultural churches. And I say coded because most of them are just multicultural in attendance, but really not the culture and the ethos and the leadership of the community and of that church. And so I um, felt very unsafe. And I really, actually, I don't think no, I never went back after that. I visited other times, but I just never went back after that moment. I was like, this is just not for me, and I can't shake it. I can't get rid of it. I just can't do it anymore. And I didn't want a white pastor anymore. That's the other thing. So,
Yeah, like I need somebody that look like me up there, or like that is a person of color.
but,
Honestly, because
yes.
it's like I've realized that you're preaching from your context, and my context is like
Totally, it's just different.
it's different, and it's like I don't, and it got to a point like I can't even relate to what you're saying. Um, yeah. So there's that. But I want to hop back in because listen, I go off on a tangent, like for real. So you get back from this mission trip and something has shifted in you. You like, listen, I'm correcting all y'all. This is not okay. I'm not gonna be your token person. Just and don't think I want you. Just because I talk like this, that don't mean no. Like I'm not one of you. Don't try
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah.
what was it in you where you're like, okay, this is kind of my new perspective on, you know, who I am, who they are, and then now I got to try to figure out faith wise because now that can make you wrestle with your faith. I will say that being sometimes in predominantly white spaces and being around predominantly white people and the microaggressions and the racism, just point blank,
Mhm.
can make you question some things and make you
Mhm.
wrestle with some things. So, what was that like for you, where you kind of took a pivot and then you really started thinking about, okay, this is what I think I'm called to do. Like, this is what I need to put out in the world, like to help
Mhm.
other people.
I think that moment caused me to more so accept who I was without feeling like I wasn't enough. Because my context as a Black young woman was, there was, now it's different, but there was barely anybody back then who was homeschooled. So I felt so like out of place in so many ways from other Black kids because of the way that I was raised. And my parents were not trying to let us watch anything, whatever there's plenty of rules about what we could watch, what we could not watch. Um, what we could and could not consume. And so that just meant that a lot of things that other Black kids were talking about, I was like, huh? Like I didn't know. And my brother would know because he would probably like, sneak and figure it out. And then he would just pass it on to me, like so I could stay semi-culturally relevant. But I was not like a break the rule kind of person. So I just didn't know a lot of different things. And so sometimes I just felt like I didn't fit in as a young Black woman. Like I didn't want my Black card to be revoked. So I just kept, kind of like kept some things to myself. Or if I didn't know something, I only told my brother because I didn't want to like look crazy in front of people. And so I think when I came back from that trip, that started a long journey, but it started a long journey of like internal self acceptance of my own self as a Black woman and realizing that I didn't have to fit into whatever boxes existed to still be a Black woman, right? So I had to say to myself, I'm still Black. Like, it doesn't matter if I know all the things or don't know all the things or do this or do that or don't do this or don't do that. Like, I'm still a Black woman. And so, owning that, coming back, accepting that, especially after being in Rwanda and seeing my people and seeing everybody who looked like me, I was like, there's a place for me to belong. Half of them don't even know half of our cultural context and what we do and what's considered in or out. But they're me and I'm them. Like I saw myself in those people. And so I came back with more assurance and pride about what it means to be a Black woman and a Black person, and that we have a whole continent and kingdoms and kings and queens and people doing amazing stuff. And I came back with pride. And even though I don't know exactly where my family is from and I haven't done the whole ancestry DNA stuff yet, but I just came back knowing, okay, I know a little bit more about who I am and I know what I will not accept. And so, yeah, I was correcting people and talked to one professor. So, what is it like being a young Black woman in this school? And you're like the only one in the classroom. And I took time to talk to him. And he said that he wanted to do like a panel on stage and talk about it. That never happened. And that was one of the first encounters of me understanding that people were going to talk to me, want to exploit my knowledge, my feelings, and show some level of guilt and do nothing. And so I was like, okay. So I spent that last semester because I've blazed through school. I did 4 years of school pretty much in 3 years. And I just said, okay, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to show up to this school. But in my senior year, because we had to go to chapel every day, I just stopped going to chapel. I stopped doing most of the things that you had to do. Faith wise, like you have to do this, you have to do that. And I started asking questions. And I spent my 20s asking questions. I didn't enter my 20s like, I have to, whatever, this or that. I spent so much of my teens in that youth group movement where you're just like on fire for the Lord and you're just doing all this, whatever stuff. And My 20s was like, some of this does not add up.
The math is
And
not mathing. Let's
the
go.
math was not mathing. Yes. I was like, and so from there, I became emboldened about wanting to show up fully as a young Black woman and exploring what that looked like for me, and understanding my identity and accepting it, instead of feeling shame for not feeling like, oh, I don't fit in with everybody else, right? And I know that I'm not the only Black person who's felt like that, because I watch it all the time with young people still now on TikTok, young kids who are, 19, 20, saying, I haven't felt like I fit in, or the people who bullied me were Black kids because I didn't color inside of these certain lines, or because I like anime, or because I liked to cosplay, or because, whatever the, thing might be. And so, I felt called to activism. I always knew that. I was always justice oriented personality wise. I was always the person who's going to be with the kid who didn't have any friends. And so I started working as a social worker for a Christian agency right out of college. I got a job. And when I tell you, case management was the hardest job I've ever done. But these white people, these good Christian white people, I thought I came away from college with questions. I came away from this, chunk of the beginning of my 20s working in case management with even more. And I spent time on and off in case management from the time I was 21 till the time I was 26. And those years were some of the hardest years for me, faith wise, because these were the people who were rejecting kids, who just had not great things to say about certain families, biological families of these kids. A lot of the kids are Black, and a lot of them got adopted into white homes. And I still, to this day, I told a friend that's a case manager, I said, I still to this day have like feelings of regret of letting these Black kids get adopted by some of these white people. But also at the same time, you kind of didn't have much of a choice, because where were they going to go? And then if they were in a good home, that was just kind of like all the judge really needed to keep a child there. And then some of the children were adjusted into the homes. And so there's just not much you can do, sometimes. Now, there was a time when there was something I could do, and I did do something about it. But their lack of care, and this wasn't everybody, but some of them, their lack of care for some of these kids and their stories and their biological parents, and or their connection to their biological parents, truly grieved me. And so I really began to wrestle, because I was like, wow, how is anything that I'm seeing said or displayed here reflecting Jesus? Like, how does this reflect Jesus? And if this is the Jesus that these people know, then I don't know that Jesus. And that's when I started to ask myself, like, where does my faith fit with this? Because what I'm experiencing, it doesn't fit with what I see.
Yeah. Oh, oh, I can't imagine. Especially with the
Woo.
adoption, because um, sometimes I feel like there is an expectation of assimilation as opposed to embracing what this child's culture is, right? We just need you to assimilate to how we do life, what we do. And there is this, you have to abandon
Oh
your
yeah.
heritage, your culture. And that feels way too familiar with enslaved people, because that
Yes.
was the expectation
Yes.
is you need to leave your native tongue behind, your religion behind, all of that, and you assimilate to what we say, what we do. And oh,
It's heavy.
oh my
It's
God.
heavy. And that's what they do expect. I mean, they'll tell you, no, we have friends, we have this, we have that. Like, some people would say, well, we do have a friend, we have some Black people at our church. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to say this to you. Black friends that you have, if you're saying that you have Black friends, those are the people who are on your walls. You see all these friends you have in your picture frames around your house? I said, those are your friends. I said, your friends are the people on your Instagram. I said, so if you're telling me that you have friends at church that are people that are Black at church or of a different ethnicity at church, those aren't your friends if you don't have them in any form of representation in your house. And they would just kind of look at me like, it didn't help that I like look super young, So they were just like, oh, okay. So now this little young Black girl gonna come in here and tell me that I ain't got no friends that are people are going. Yeah, I did. I said it. And they had a problem with it. And so not only was it the fact that I was young and black, but it was I was young and black and telling them how to approach parenting a child of color. And a lot of people didn't like that. And the racism, and I'm going to say this, was especially worse than from when I worked in Houston, than when I moved to Austin and worked as a case manager in Austin. White people love to pride themselves on being liberal and how free flowing and we accept everybody. It's just not the truth. The racism abounds. It just looks different. It's just more covert in some ways, but it's like liberal for y'all, not liberal for us. And so the amount of racism that I experienced and pushback from white parents was worse in Austin than it was in Houston. And so for me, it was different in Houston because you're so used to everybody. Like if you're raised in Houston, you understand you're going to see a little bit of everybody and you're just used to that. You go to Austin, white, 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 very white. So many of the black communities being pushed out of East Austin, and you won't even recognize it anymore, and have been pushed out into further suburbs. And so the experience that I had with white folks was very racist. So that should just tell you something. So constantly, the constant rejection, frustration, just white people just not liking me fueled my fire for activism even more because I was like, y'all are full of it. Because you're saying you love God. You're saying that your faith compels you to do this, but your faith does not compel you to keep the child connected to their cultural heritage, to either move if you need to move so they're not the only white child at a school or black child at a school, and make some changes to your family to help this child developmentally and long term not have long term issues with their identity. If I, as a young black woman in a black family, and I would tell them this, in a black family, could still feel out of place, could still feel these feelings amongst white folks, what do you think that your child feels being the only in your house? And that's a problem that you don't care enough.
Oh, better you than me because I probably cussing every day. I probably cussing every single day. And like, so we talked about how it started and what the buildup was. So tell me how it's going right now. Like, what are you involved in? What is your voice in? What is your gift to the world?
Ooh, I so much happens like over life. And I like to tell people because they'll say, how did you get to where you got? And I said, I just said yes. Like, if God was leading me in a certain direction, I was like, okay, cool. Then let's lead. And I would just go in that direction. And I feel like people over spiritualize making big decisions. Um, I followed peace. I just want to be honest with that. There was not like this like audible voice like, okay, I want you to go here, turn left, sit down, take a break, then get up and go here. Like, no. It was just, here's an opportunity. I prayed about it and I followed peace. And so I have done that throughout my entire 20s. So I followed peace, and that led me to working for a nonprofit, doing like fundraising type of work, then working to do development for cultivating women in Ethiopia who were attending business school to be able to run their own businesses, to keep kids at home with their parents, which was very important to me, seeing that I had just worked with kids who had their parents in the States, had those opportunities, would have been able to keep them. And then I worked for an organization called Be the Bridge, being the program director and helping to really kickstart the programs for Be the Bridge. And I volunteered with them for like 5 years, and then spent time on staff for almost 2. And then I recently resigned from Be the Bridge to write and create full time. So right now, I am writing my forthcoming book, which I'm really excited about. It's called Remember Me Now, A Journey Back to Myself and a Love Letter to Black Women.
I
So
love it already.
thank you. Thank you. It's just encompassing my own journey, my own self-discovery journey, but just also just a letter to us, like to us Black women. And I really feel like through my time in activism, over my 20s and understanding and honing in my voice, I had to ask myself, like, what do I want to accomplish with what I feel like God has put in my hands to do? And I know that I have a gift to be able to say things where people will, listen and want to engage, the ones that need to. And I know white folks want to hear from me about certain things. And I'll talk to them when I feel like it. But I had to say to myself, what is it that's like on my heart that I really want to do? And I said, that's talk to Black women. That's what I want to do. And that's what's not happening enough, right? There's a lot of people doing a lot of good work, and talking to Black women, though, specifically, I feel like we're not doing enough of that, especially in faith spaces, faith adjacent spaces. We're not really having those hard conversations. We're not talking about how our faith walk looks different than our moms or our grandmothers. So I wanted to be a part of that. And I said, my first book needs to be a Black woman, and that's what I'm going to do. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm writing that book, and I have left Atlanta to live and be closer to my family and just be with my people, which has just mattered so much to me as I'm writing something that's so meaningful to me. And so I just have been at a place of complete peace in a way that I haven't been in a while. And it's mostly because I don't have to live under the pressure of anybody else's expectations. All I need to do is write. And that's the most pure place that I could be in right now and that I need to be in right now, to write this book to my sisters. So I'm still doing my activism work. I still do education around allyship for non-Black folks, but the core of where my attention right now is Black women. One of my friends was like, oh, you got to read this book. And I said, it's not by somebody Black. I'm going to be honest with you. I can't read it right now. Like, I am only consuming things by Black people, specifically Black women, as I'm writing, because that's where my head needs to be. And I said, and once the smoke clears and, I'm done with the first draft and the edits, I can think about consuming content by women who are not Black. But for the time being, that's just not what I want to make room for. And I think it's so healthy for me because I spent so much time consuming content and books by white women, because mostly, I'm going to be honest with you, that's what was around for me in terms of, like, I worked at a Christian bookstore for my first job, and, like, what was stocked on the shelf, Black women wise, Priscilla Shire, and that was about it.
That's it.
I was really trying to think. I was like, I mean,
Listen, I used to be a Lifeway junkie, and one day I
yeah.
walked in, and then I just looked around. I said, first of all, Beth Moore had a whole section to herself. Like, it was like Beth Moore. It was like,
Yeah,
and
especially
I
in
was like,
Houston, she was everywhere.
exactly. But I was like, where are the Black women? You're right, Priscilla Shire literally is like the only
That was it. I mean,
somebody
music
else.
wise, Nicole C. Mullen, she was
Yes,
popping at the time. So I would see her CDs. I remember when Jamie Grace came out, I was like, wow, okay, she's young, So I would see hers, and then Out of Eden, Trinity 5-7, some of
yeah,
them. CC, you would see some of that
mhm,
gospel. But that was pretty much it. So when it came to reading books specifically, not just music, by Black women having just thoughts about life and discussing, and it, I was consuming books by white folks because that's just what was,
literally.
that was what that they were, what I'm trying to say. That's all there was. That was it.
Yeah,
And there weren't books talking about our life, our experiences, our maneuvering, our identity in a, faith-based context, if you will. Um, and so I remember looking at the bookshelf saying, like, man, I really wish I could see somebody like me on these shelves. And I just said to myself, one day it will be me, and one day I will do this. And that's just exactly what I did. But I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, it took a long road and a lot of humility and just trusting God to even get to this point, because I was kind of like, I don't know, when it happens, it happens. This is too much work. Like trying to make it happen, it just felt like too much. And so I just said, if it happens, great. I know it will. I know I want to, but I don't know when, and I'll just hopefully be ready when it comes.
That's a word right there. That is a whole word right there. So, how can people support you? How can people, support the work that you're doing? How would you like for people to do that?
Yeah, so you can support me by following me on social media. You can follow me at Faith B. I spell my name with two T's, so Faitthb. And then, I mean, honestly, I feel like sharing is caring. Spreading the word, sharing with other people about the work that I'm doing is always super helpful. I want to connect with more Black women for sure. And so, anytime that I can connect with Black women, I'm like, yes, please, thank God. So please connect with me. I love connecting with and meeting new people. So that's probably the best way now. Once my book comes out, I'll talk a lot more about that and how we can all like band together. But until then, I think that's like the best way for sure.
Awesome. So, what is some lasting thoughts that you have for women who are listening? You already said something that I was like, that was powerful, and that was that we over spiritualize things, that you just followed peace. Like, whatever, that's where the yes came. Like, if it was peace, that's the direction I'm headed in. So that's the takeaway. I got, and I'm like, that blessed me right there.
Uh-huh.
But what are some lasting words that you want to leave with women who may either be on this journey of kind of figuring out who they are, redefining who they are, kind of reevaluating their faith and what their purpose is really on this earth?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, like where I settled faith wise was that I understood from the time that I was a child, I had a solid connection with Jesus. And there were no lines for me drawn of what that needed to look like until I got older and everybody told you how to approach it. And so I decided to go back to my childlike faith. I prayed that God would restore my childlike faith in Jesus that was um, apart from church tradition, and that I would just want to connect with God the way that I did when I was a child. And I accepted that. And I prayed for a long time for it and I got it. So that meant that I was still saved when I went to church. I was still saved when I didn't go to church. I was still saved on the beach in Tulum, and I was still saved in Thailand. And I was still saved whenever I went to Amsterdam. I was saved wherever I went. And I stopped defining my salvation by what I did, or if I read my Bible that day or not, or if I had a journal filled with prayers or not. I was still saved. And that's what freed me, because works and trying to live up to an expectation of what I thought my faith should look like bound me and made me feel shame. And that's just not the heart of Jesus. So if you're feeling shame about not doing all the stuff, then you're not doing your faith right, because you shouldn't feel burdened and you shouldn't feel shame. And so my hope is that if, as you're exploring your faith and seeing what that looks like for you, like discover with God what your boxes need to look like, how you should color, how you need to discover and connect with God. Like that looks different for everybody. There's no one size fits all. And unfortunately, we've been sold a 10-step approach to approaching Jesus, and that's wrong. There is no 10 steps, follow this, and this is going to happen for you. So be okay with saying no and be okay with disappointing people because your relationship with God doesn't look like the way somebody's told you it should look or how you've been taught it should look. Once I was okay with disappointing people and just living my life, I said, oh, okay, I'm cool now. So, I'm chilling. My brother's a pastor, and it's like, if you see me at church, you see me. If you don't, you don't. Don't get comfortable seeing me. Honestly, like, if I
Yeah.
show up, great. If I don't miss me. So, I just think I got really comfortable with that because church attendance doesn't define your salvation. There's a lot of people who are terrible people who attend church every Sunday, and that doesn't mean that they are really transformed by the Spirit. So, free yourself, free your mind. And the other thing is that many of you are waiting for something to happen and you're feeling frustrated and disappointed it hasn't happened yet. Life has a way of taking a course you just did not want it to take. And when we open ourselves up to saying, okay, this is not what I wanted, when we allow ourselves to be mad about what didn't happen and open ourselves up to feeling instead of hiding and being upset in private and not really dealing with it, things change for us. There's power in naming. There's power in saying, I'm upset, I'm mad at that person, I'm bitter, I'm jealous, I'm frustrated. There's power in that because you can be transformed and set free from what's binding you when you choose to name exactly what it is. So that's what I'll say about that.
Listen, that's the word of God for the people of God. So, Faith, I am so grateful for you being on She Will Not Fall podcast. And just, I really wanted to create this space to just highlight dope women. And so, I'm really grateful that I got to talk to you. It is a pleasure seeing the work that you're doing, and I want to support you however I can. And I know that anybody listening right now definitely is like, oh, I'm gonna sew into this girl because she good. Listen. But yeah, I'm really grateful that you're here and that we can really talk and have this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.